I think it is extraordinary that Mark Carney has become the Prime Minister of Canada. He did a terrible job in Britain.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.
Reticent to talk about that.
Because I'm a good negotiator. I have negotiated a number of situations in the past. I know how to manage crises. I did apologize to the president. President was offended by the act.
Let me finish by pointing out one other thing. Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump? It's Pierre Poilievre. He worships the man.
Happy birthday. A few days short. A little bit. A few days short, but didn't have a chance to see you on the day.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations, you're spending more money on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined.
Well, as it stands right now, the federal government seemingly does not have the support it needs to pass its budget. Before MPs vote on Monday, the finance minister is urging his colleagues on all sides of the aisle not to bring down the government.
People understand that we need to meet the moment. This is not a time for political games. This is not a time for posturing. This is a time to fight for Canada. Fight together, meet the moment, elevate yourself above politics. Like I said, I think there must be a number of colleagues who will do a bit of soul searching over the weekend.
Okay, so what can we expect from the official opposition? Let's ask Adam Chambers. He's an Ontario Conservative MP and the Conservative Party International Trade Critic. Adam Chambers, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me, David.
Are you going to take Minister Champagne's advice and do some soul searching over the weekend to see if you can come to peace with this budget and vote in favor?
Well, soul searching is a very deep, deep request, reflective request from the finance minister. The searching that I've been doing in Ottawa recently is the money tree that Minister Champagne seems to think exists and bears perpetual fruit. We've indicated to the government a number of suggestions on how they could have earned Conservative supports for the budget. Was about having a lower deficit, some additional investments we had recommended, some additional enhancements to ideas that Liberals already had in terms of GST off of new homes, for example. You know, they're limiting it to just first-time home buyers. We said that should be to everybody. So Conservatives actually put forward some ideas that we hope that the government would take us up on. They have not done that. And given the fact that they've blown past their own deficit target, you know, they ran on a $62 billion deficit in the election, and now we're up almost at $80 billion just this year. So we've been very clear about our expectations and our intentions, and that's where we are. Although in your earlier panel, people mentioned they need to find 2 votes. There are multiple parties that the government could work with in order to find those 2 votes.
Right. And look, and I understand it is the government's job to get something that gets the confidence of the House. But, you know, it's your job as Conservatives to look out for the best political interests of the Conservative Party. And I wonder if that's an election right now at this moment. Are you willing to take steps to vote against the budget in a show of force, but not necessarily force Parliament to fall and go into a Christmas election? Where's your thinking on that?
I would say, just on your premise, I would say our primary objective isn't the political interests of the Conservative Party. I think our primary objective is to make sure that we're advocating on behalf of Canadians for the things that they have told us that they want to see. You know, we did just finish elections 6 months ago. Right. The things that many Conservatives heard at the door across this country, even in ridings in which we were unsuccessful, there is still a large number of people who want to see affordability as the primary concern that is being addressed by the government. And additionally, you know, deficits and these endless deficits that have really no end in sight create challenges for the next generation, but as well, in some cases, drive up prices today for people.
Right. Okay. If I said primary objective, I didn't necessarily mean it was your primary, but it is a factor you have to consider. But it sounds like, based on what you've just said and what your leader has said, that you tend to vote en masse and perhaps with unanimity against the budget on Monday. Yes, that's where it is?
Well, my expectation, you know, for me, I'm showing up. I will be voting no on Monday in order to pass the budget for the reasons we've described. I expect that my colleagues would be in the same position. I have not heard otherwise from anyone. You know, I'm not on the leadership team, but our expectation is that we will be voting no, as we have outlined publicly and very consistently over the last number of weeks, if not months.
Okay, look, I want to get to the major project, but one quick question on just, are you comfortable that the unrest in the caucus has settled and that everybody who's a Conservative now will be a Conservative on Monday and doing whatever it is you're going to do as a party with the budget?
I think that's right. I mean, all the Conservatives caucus members that I've been in touch with, we want to make sure we get back to Ottawa. We're working on the issues that affect the country, that speak to Canadians, whether that's crime, whether that's housing, whether that's affordability. Like, we are united in making sure we're holding this government accountable to deliver on those things that we've been hearing matter to Canadians.
Okay, so first one, because when I listened to Dawn Farrell's answer, and she explained how the office she's leading will help align permitting processes, that it can take a 6-year process down to 2. It's like, oh, that's pretty good. But then the reverse of that is that if you don't have the help of the office, then what could be a 2-year process remains a 6-year process. And that speaks to the challenges that companies have been complaining about. But we did hear from Canada Nickel CEO Mark Selby, part of the Timmins project, and he says this referral is actually going to help them get private capital, that it sends a signal to international investors and partners to get involved here, and it may draw capital to their project that otherwise wouldn't be there. So is there still value in it, even if it's not a perfect system?
Well, I would hope that if a government has said that they like a certain project, that would obviously be a selling point for some potential investors. But does that mean that all investors are now going to wait and only invest in projects that the government has now given a green light to through the Major Projects Office? I think this is yet another example of why we need to fix the underlying issues in the regulatory permitting process. And in order to create an environment where you have all these opportunities available to anybody, so long as they have, they go through the proper process, in a process that's predictable and fast, and one that is not dependent upon the government in order to give somebody the special green ticket.
Do you see a world, Adam Chambers, where the lessons they learn shepherding these projects through, whatever this process is, leads to that broader reform? I know there's a call to get rid of a mass array of regulations, but could these projects be the pace car that kind of, bulldoze some of that?
David, you're very optimistic. I mean, the government has not said that yet. I mean, they could have easily said at the beginning or shortly after the election, look, we want to reform the overall process, but in the first 24 months or the first 18 months, here's what we're going to do. We want to get things going, so we're going to create this other track while we do the hard work of doing an overhaul review. Those are not the messages that the government's giving. I think had they been giving those messages, I think they would be in a little bit of a better position to say, that they are considering doing some of this reform. All indications suggest that they won't be doing that.
But they have talked about a red tape reduction, a red tape review, regulatory review. I've spoken to people in DFO and other places being tasked with overhauling the issues in sort of the Fisheries Act that, limit development near water. So there is a process that is happening. It's just, is it large enough and is it public enough and fast enough, I guess?
I think if the process was going to yield substantial fruits, this government has shown itself to promise very high expectations, set very high expectations for itself. They have not been suggesting that the regulatory review is going to result in significant improvements. I hope, of course, that they do result in significant improvements, but I would think that they should be a lot broader and more ambitious than what they've indicated.
Okay. Conservative MP Adam Chambers, thanks for joining us. Maybe we'll talk to you next week, especially if we're in the middle of an election campaign. Thanks for being here today, sir.
Thanks for having me again, David.
Oh, yeah. On Monday, the House of Commons votes on the minority Liberal government's budget support motion. The Prime Minister is just 2 votes short of a majority, so he'll need opposition votes or abstentions to get it passed in the House of Commons. If any MPs are still on the fence about it, well, they've got some new reading this weekend. The interim parliamentary budget officer finished crunching the numbers, and it says, or he says, that it's unlikely the government will meet its own fiscal markers. However, the PBO has said that the proposed fiscal policy is sustainable. While the 7 NDP MPs and Green leader Elizabeth May have yet to declare their vote intentions, we do know the Conservatives plan to vote no. Joining us right now is Conservative international trade critic Adam Chambers. Mr. Chambers, welcome back to Power Play.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I want to start sort of where Mr. Poilievre left off there. Now, he says he's confident that every single one of the MPs in your caucus will be voting no against the budget. Do you have that type of confidence as well, or do you think that there could be some abstentions? And the reason I ask is because on that sub-amendment, or the amendment and sub-amendment last week, we had Matt Genereux, who did abstain.
Well, I expect on Monday, which is the excuse me, the main vote, that the Conservatives will be present and voting no. I can speak for myself when I say that. We've been fairly consistent about that, even in the lead up to the budget, in our requests from what we would like the government to have included, or compromises that we would have expected or suggested that the government make in order to achieve Conservative support. As you mentioned, there's only 2 votes that are required for the budget to pass. It is not a high hurdle for that government, or for the government to meet. And I am told or understand that the government is in negotiations with other party leaders, including Ms. May, about potentially securing their support, and frankly encourage them to do so. You know, I recall in 2008, 2009, and in those minority parliament days, it was Prime Minister Harper and Jim Flaherty's responsibility to ensure that their government budget passed so that the government could continue and not have an election. So I'd expect that Prime Minister Carney would be doing the same thing.
When you say you encourage them to do that, is it because you don't want an election, or do you just want to see this budget passed?
Well, the results of the last election were that the Liberal Party did not achieve enough votes to get the majority of the seats in the House of Commons. And so I think that is an implicit request or an implicit instruction from the people to have multiple parties work together. As I said, the Conservatives made some fairly specific and reasonable requests in terms of capping the size of the deficit. Even if the Prime Minister would have kept close to what he promised during the election, which was a $62 billion deficit. We're now at 78. That is quite the miss. It's also almost double what Prime Minister Trudeau had suggested just about a year ago, including additional support for people who purchase houses, taking the GST off of homes. The government has suggested they'll only do that for first-time purchasers. That's only a few thousand people a year. We said we would remove and defer capital gains, or suggested the government defer capital gains for Canadians or Canadian companies who sell assets in Canada but want to reinvest those assets here. These were a few of the ideas that we had put forward that we would say would help Conservatives vote for the budget, but the Prime Minister did not take us up on that, and instead introduced an even larger deficit that he promised during the election. So I think for Conservatives, it's actually quite an easy discussion. It is a discussion that we have had, but it is an easy decision. I ran in 2021 because I thought Prime Minister Trudeau was spending too much money. So this is just by and far well in advance of what the Prime Minister had even ran on just 6 months ago.
I want to dig into the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report that he put out today and some of his findings. Specifically, you know, breaking apart the budget, he highlighted that. Are the Conservatives opposed to that, breaking it into capital and operating streams?
Well, I would say 2 things. First is politicians will likely always take the opportunity to justify additional spending. Make no mistake, splitting the budget into capital and operating is the justification that the government uses to have larger and run larger deficits. So that's the first challenge that we have. On its face, like from a theoretical perspective, you can understand why some people don't mind splitting this out. However, even if you agreed with splitting capital and operating, the Parliamentary Budget Officer also says that the government's definitions of capital are way too broad. Even in the government's own budget, they compare what other countries do when they split out capital and operating. They did not find another country that treated tax credits to corporations as capital spending. They offered no comparable country that did that. That is an overly broad definition of capital. That is what the Parliamentary Budget Officer is talking about when he says it's a broad definition. This government is including things in the capital spending ledger that are just, frankly, operational spending in any other jurisdiction. So even if you were attracted to that kind of delineation, I do think it raises some challenges with respect to the government's classifications of capital and operating. But the bottom line is, the amount of money that the government has to borrow every year to keep the government functioning, that does not change no matter how you call it one way or the other. Next year, the government has to borrow over $600 billion in the bond markets in order to keep the government functioning. That is almost a record. Last year, it was a record at $630 billion. The way that the government is spending is just far too expensive for Canadians.
But by the same token, the parliamentary budget officer did say that Canada's debt as a share of GDP will decline over the next 30 years. And he actually said it gives the Liberal government a sustainable fiscal position. Does that not give you any level of comfort?
Well, the government has not met any deficit or debt reduction targets that it set forward. So I am not comforted by the government's own projections. In 2015,
but this is the parliamentary budget officer. With respect, it's the parliamentary budget officer that's saying that they're on a good fiscal track, or a sustainable fiscal track, I should say.
I think that assumes that the government will meet the projections that it is suggesting it will. The parliamentary budget officer also said in the same report that it has less than a 10%, a 7.5% chance of hitting its own fiscal anchors, which the government says are new. So I think the parliamentary budget officer is quite rightly suggesting that they are cautiously warning that the fiscal sustainability is, while it appears to be sustainable, it may not be if the government cannot meet its own projections.
Okay, Mr. Chambers, I appreciate the conversation. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it right there. Conservative international trade critic Adam Chambers, we appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me on a Friday, Mike.
Oh, yeah. I personally find it very confusing how any Liberal voter, like, I'm sure you're naive, like, it's okay to be duped. I've been duped. I voted for Trudeau in 2015, believe it or not. So it was a big mistake. I wasn't watching or paying attention then, but I have been paying very close attention since 2023. And let me tell you, these guys don't care about your future. They want your money in their pockets, your future, your kids' future, your grandchildren's futures in their pockets. See what they're doing to Canada with immigration. See what they're doing with housing. Check out what they're doing with our health care. What is better than it was in 2015? Absolutely nothing. It's confusing to me. On a lighter note, my name's Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. I work very hard at this channel, and believe me, I'm not a conservative. I will be voting that way. It seems to be the only way to get out from underneath this Liberal conspiracy to destroy our way of being. And if you think like, oh, I don't want to admit that I was fooled or that I was raised liberal, so I'm still a liberal, change it up, because they have no plans for your future except lining their pockets with your tax dollars, laundering that money, spending it in other places. So Mark Carney, Justin Trudeau, all these hack bullshit ministers can get richer on your coin under the guise of being incompetent or negligent. Like, it's not that. They mean to be doing what they're doing, and they're pulling it off. There is no future for Canada under this government. So I watch all the committee meetings. I watch everything that happens in the House of Commons. I also follow the propaganda-driven news of the legacy media that is paid for by this government to dissuade your mind into some kind of trick to think that they're doing it for the benefit of you. It's not for you. Liberal voters, I'm speaking right to you. Please watch the politics, not the news. Like, watch the independents on YouTube. Do anything other than what you're doing, because if you're still being duped and not aware that you're being fooled, that's a huge issue. My name's Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe. I work very hard at this channel. Believe it or not, I spend 12 hours a day, 7 days a week at this, because it takes a lot of time to watch all of the politics. But that is where you get your real information. So I would appreciate your subscription. I know that a lot of people that watch this channel, 60% of the people that watch my channel aren't subscribed. I need you to subscribe. I'd like you to subscribe. I'm asking for that because this stuff is so censored, which is a part of legacy media, that it's hard to get any kind of word out. I know that there's other platforms. Just go to that. I know that a lot of people, liberal voters, watch YouTube, and I'm hoping they'll catch some of this and become informed. Learn a little more, because again, it's not a liberal conservative thing. It's an evil versus good thing. I'm not a conservative like I will be voting that way because we need to get out from underneath this elephant that keeps squashing us. It's ridiculous. Please like, share, subscribe, get notified. Come check out one of our live shows. We cover Canadian federal politics right there. And I think you'd enjoy our chat room. It's the best that I've seen online. That's it, Aaron. Canadian Loney, like, share, subscribe. We'll catch you in the next video. We're going to wrap it up right here. Out for now. Thanks for watching.